would you do when you weren't running a publicly traded company or flying around in MiG jets for fun? I'll tell you what you'd do. You'd come on my show and talk about the first 100 days, small business, young men and courage, and really just give a huge fired up pep talk for all the listeners. That's right. Join me with Evan Hafer, CEO of Black Rifle Coffee Company, this week on the David Rutherford Show. All right, everybody. I got to tell you, there's probably 5 people in this world that when I get an opportunity to sit down with them, you know, they start giving me the motivation that I need, the motivation that I seek, the things that enable me to kind of reevaluate my life, reevaluate what I'm doing, reevaluate, you know, what my mission is every day. And I'm just beyond blessed to have one of those people, one of those men that I love more than my, you know, many of my own family members myself, you know, is Mr. Evan Hafer. So Evan, brother, it's so good to see your face, man. How you doing?
Man, I'm doing great. Your introductions are like always quite a bit humbling. And like, you know, Dave and I, like, just to explain to people, we have like these very deep philosophical conversations that at times, you know, we'll go into 40 different rabbit holes, but they're some of the best conversations that like I have in my life, right? Period. So, and I always know when things are in the grind, when things are really hard, if I ping Dave, hey man, things are hard. He's like, hey dude, hang in there. Like, let's go, you know, kind of like fires you up. So I'm super happy. One, I'm super happy. And I think it's great that everybody gets Dave back. Right. So like, man, I'll do whatever. Cause like you being out there in the world, having a voice, like talking to men, women, families around the United States, around the world, like it's a really, really important mission. And whatever I can do to help, it's the least I can do is spend a couple hours of my life talking to my friend Dave. Like that's pretty easy.
I think our last one we clocked in Austin when we saw each other was probably, it was like 3.5 hours, man.
That was legit. Yeah.
That was awesome. All right. So, you know, I think the thing that's really kind of getting to me lately is obviously, you know, everybody was super pumped and super fired up and yeah, Trump's back in office and when everything's going to change and the Epstein list is coming out and we're going to drop bombs on cartels' heads and we're going to clean up, you know, the corruption and we're going to put the Bidens and Fauci in jail and, you know, and everybody's all riding this freaking high of like, oh yeah, that's not just campaign promises, man. That's not, you know, that's really going to happen, you know, right. Dude. And I'll tell you what, man, I don't know about you. You're a little bit better at your reluctance to get, you know, sucked into the madness of X or any of the other places, but because you are running a publicly traded company, but you know, for the last month or so, man, the vultures are out going at these people. To just start, how would you rate the first 100 days, man? I mean, what are you feeling?
Well, I think I like to rewind a little bit from that and just say, you know, the budget was already approved and passed, right? So that's his first year. So, you know, there was a lot of people that had this high degree of optimism that we'd be able to kind of reset government spending on an accelerated level, but that's just not going to happen because the budget was already passed and essentially we're already in it. So there's things that you have to do through executive order in order to really get to, like, how do we build next year's budget? How do we cut out the excess now? How do we and I'm always pro, let's like eliminate fraud, waste, and abuse. Let's stop government spending in a way that's like directly affecting the freedom and the individual rights of Americans. Like you gotta like take it all out. Right. So, but there does have to be like a bit of realism in the context of there's only so much you can do in the big machine. And I think that the first 90 days is probably the most active and what I would say is the accelerated movement of dismantling inappropriate government fraud, waste, and abuse, like in modern history. I can't think of a time when it's ever been done like this. So it gives me a ton of hope. Like it really does. It gives me a ton of hope that like we'll actually be able to put a dent in the $36 trillion deficit that we're in, take away the tax and economic burden of the American citizen and give our freedoms back. And I know that from an individual that's looking at it, I'm participating in politics in a way of just like information as a consumer, right? So I always know that there's a lot of things going on under the waterline, right? It's like what we see and what's actually happening underneath the waterline. Like there's a lot of activity and a lot of things are taking place, but I find a lot of hope in the right people surrounding the president. I think he has the right people in place now. Like I think he learned a lot from the first administration. I think he placed a lot of the right people around him in the second one. So I would say I'm really actually extremely impressed with the amount of work that's already been done. I'm hopeful that we'll be able to take out a lot of the fraud, waste, and abuse. And I'm really hopeful that we'll be able to see some of our freedoms returned to the American citizens. Like we have to get our liberty back. And
oh God, that's the thing for me, man. Like, and it's like, it's such a complicated thing, right? It's like, we think about liberty as, oh, I get to wake up, I get to go to my job, I get to do this, but nobody takes a deep dive. Well, maybe not. We released a show last week about the judicial system and what we're seeing there. And so it's like, wait a minute. You're telling me now that a guy that's part of a designated terrorist organization, international gang, who beat his girlfriend or wife, who was rightfully deported because he had already been identified by multiple law enforcement agencies, that guy is who the other party is going to go and defend and start having, all these crazy rallies about, and AOC's up in front of some massive crowd the other day, just completely gaslighting the crowd. And that's what they're getting behind. And so that's the thing that's so shocking to me, is that even with the exposures from the, what was his name? Big Balls and Doge.
Yeah. What was it? Yeah.
Harry Balls, I think
Balls.
It was. Yeah. So even when all that's happening, you can't deny it. You can't look at the fact that USAID was funding 9 out of 10 of the news agencies in Ukraine, right, to show favorable support of Zelensky. Even in the midst of all that, people are still kind of asleep as to what is taking place in the, under the veneer of what we see on screen. Do you think that like Pete or Tulsi, do you think, or even Robert RFK Jr., do you think they're running into some challenges?
Oh, 100%. The bureaucrats that have, their job is to upward. Their jobs typically, when I look at them, right, they're to seize power and control, right? So, and it's interesting because Mike Lee is a Utah senator. I live in Utah, and Mike had a great podcast with Tucker last year where he talked about the legislative body and their ability to essentially offload their authorities and responsibilities to these government agencies. They've given them more power and more authority. And Mike's much more articulate. I mean, he's a congressional scholar. He's an attorney. So I can't summarize and do it any justice whatsoever. But understanding that, these federal entities have way more power than they should. And when you forfeit your responsibilities, what that does is it says, well, as a politician, you can come back and say, re-elect me and I'll fix the problem, right? But then they can go back and blame it on another federal agency or a federal entity. Right. And they can go, but this time this time, baby, I'm going to do it right, but this time I'm not, I'm going to do it right this time. So it just kind of perpetuates this cycle of non-accountability. And then as kind of bureaucrats grow within their power structure, they've been able to, what I would say is like, they'll fortify their positions from different political administrations and entities. And so I see this as really like putting power back where it belongs, which is with the people. I guarantee we don't see it, but I guarantee they are hitting roadblock after roadblock. Oh. Passive resistance is a real thing, right? So
100%. My thing is like, I'm watching, they have, it seems like with the two of them in particular, they're on this not media camp, but like public relations campaign, right? Just yesterday or today, it was, they were doing a workout together with the Marines. And then you see Pete's over here working out with team guys or at an ODA team. And man, I love that. I think, that's what you want to feel like. You want to feel like, oh yeah, that dude would get into the fight. She'd get into the fight. I mean, my favorite videos are, Tulsi doing the 3-gun competitions and just, killing it. And so it's like, yeah, I love that. But what's going on in the Pentagon? Like, what, because there's, what is it? We have more flag officers now than we did during World War II. And I'm willing to bet a lot of those guys are all primed and ready, to get out and go get their jobs at Lockheed or wherever, right? And so the only way they do that is to make sure those government contracts are secured, right? As you move on. Well, we've already seen Trump eviscerate USAID. We have $50 billion there. I remember about like a couple weeks ago, Pete was on and he was like, we're really happy to bring Doge in to look at what we're spending money on. And then it went dark, man. So it's like, that pushback has got to be when you walk the halls of that building, man, like you're talking about that entrenched bureaucracy, but that entrenched, those entrenched dollar signs, that's got to be difficult. Do you think
power equals, budgets equal power, right? Yeah. So like when you're trying to strip budgets, you're actually stripping power, and people aren't going to just roll over and acquiesce to that like easily, right? So this is like I would say it's probably like a baseline psychological condition to most bureaucrats is like, hey, well, they believe, and a lot of them are true believers in whatever program they're running, and they're so insulated from quite possibly the plight of the taxpayer because, if they've grown up professionally in the government. I'm defending anyone. I'm saying like, I think understanding, and, you and I both come from like that background where, we saw fraud, waste, and abuse like firsthand, every day sometimes. I tend to think that a lot of people, if they were just exposed to looking at what people really are hungry for, meaning if you think about, a third of our tax or a third of our salaries and compensation in our lives are essentially given to, state, local, and federal taxes. That means 1/3 of our life is spent working for the government. Wow. For a lack of a better term. So I start to think about that like, man, we should be going to work on this budget, going to work on all of our budgets to try to reclaim our time. So we're not working for inappropriate, fraudulent programs that ultimately we don't agree with, maybe ethically, morally, spiritually. We're just not aligned, but we're just forced to kind of belly up to the bar and pay the tab for people that believe in a certain program. It's insignificant as far as the overall strategic interest of the United States. So having people kind of one team, one fight, that are in line, like seeing them working out with, the soldiers and sailors and airmen, being empathetic to the guys that are on the front lines doing the job. That to me says, okay, one, you do feel like you're in a team. Like we're part of the team. we're making a difference. It's not disconnected between us and them. It's like, we're in it with you. Let's go to work, not only trying to save lives through strong national security, but let's make sure that we're not wasting taxpayer dollars, right?
Oh, yeah.
Well,
it's paid off. It's paid off tremendously too, because look at the recruiting numbers.
Yeah.
I mean, the recruiting numbers are skyrocketing. So it's like, I'm like, yes. In fact, I keep hammering because, dude, I don't know what it is, man. It's got to be you Army motherfuckers. But he was just after like workout after workout after workout with Army, different units. And every time I'd be like, when are you going to be with NSW? When are you going to, I just kept sniping the sec def because I was like, hey man, I want a little bit of that hoo-yah going too. Like I want you to, we need to bring dudes into our thing too. And so that's like really positive for me. I feel a profound sense of resurgence and that pride and that stuff that you and I talk about, that stuff that drives us in. But I also know, from some friends, like, all right, what's happening? Like, what are the next steps? What is going to take place? In particular, the one for me, and this is, you and I had a talk about this before, and then, I think, your last time you were on with Joe Rogan, man, and that piece you did about, if the cartels get labeled as or designated as terrorists, what does this look like? How does this change? And this is the thing that I think one of the most significant thing that as Americans wanted. It's tangible, right? And so they just designated, what was it, that 10 mile between the border recently. They've militarized it. So, because I think my favorite line was, once a tier 1 unit is coming after you, that's a bad day, right?
Bad day.
Are you waiting for something like that, or are you like a lot more? Well, what's your mindset as a citizen? Like, what do you want to see first as a citizen, and then from your background as an operator, what do you hope is taking place?
Well, I think primarily number one is I want them to do their job, which is like keep America safe, and that means. Like what we have to do, I think, from like a national security position, strategic national security position, is if we have people that are, illegally importing drugs, trafficking people, and this is not only illegal activity, this is immoral, unjustified, wrong behavior that we can't just turn a blind eye and say that it's not going on. We have to do something about it. We have to identify, first and foremost, is like identifying you have a problem, right? Isn't that like step one? And like the steps of recovery is like, hey, let's identify we have a problem, right? It's like, it's like the steps of recovery. So for me, the way I look at it is like step one, we have a problem. Step two, identify the problems. And then you have to look at them from like macro to micro elements as far as impact, and then go to work on the big macro elements and then work your way down to the micro elements. But you have to have measurable impact. So what I'm actually waiting for is the results. I want to see numbers. I don't want to see lip service. I don't want to see any more like,
you don't want to see Chrissy Nome holding.
Yeah. I want to see metrics, man. I want to see metrics. Like,
and what are the metrics you're looking for? What do you want to see? How many terrorists, how much money they've lost? Obviously the inflow of illegals in the human trafficking ring, it's pummeled. I just saw something this morning that this time last year it was like 370,000 for April, and now it's like 7,000, or March. It was March numbers. And so, that's a
huge tangible number.
Right. That's a tangible number. So we see that taking place, but we also know, and there's a few people out there that are really doing great coverage. Oscar Blue, I forget his last name, but he's out there with Ben Berkwam on top.
Oh, yeah.
And he's doing the stuff he's covering now, which is unbelievable, is that we've shut off, right, the human smuggling operation. And then, now we just saw that monster $500 million bust down in Florida that Cash was out there promoting in Pambandi. Now they're tempering off the inflow of fentanyl and drugs. What's going to take place in Mexico, in these cities? and it's going to be mass chaos. It's violence So are we looking for? I mean, is there a bounty count number that we need to see as Americans?
I think that's part of it. I think it's,
Now, a quick message for one of our favorite sponsors, Firecracker Farms. Do you like spicy food? Well, this is the company for you. If you want a really amazing way to enhance your palate, to enhance your food, then check out their hot pepper infused salt. That's right, these beautiful salt shakers, a little douse here and there on your food, and you get that great spicy kick you're always looking for. Go visit firecracker.farm and type in RUT15. That's Romeo Uniform Tango 15 for your discount. Family-owned business that puts a lot of love into its products. Booyah. I mean, is there a bounty count number that we need to see as Americans?
I think that's part of it. I think it's, dollars are just the measuring point as far as like the economic success. So I think you actually have to measure the microeconomy that's associated with any black market economy, which is basically what we have, right? So if we look at illegal activity as a whole, and then you have to look at it as, okay, this is a black market illegal activity economy. Okay, now let's take a look at the economic impact. We have to say, if the black market economy, and I'm using like general terms here, but the gross domestic product of, the Mexican cartel is X, and we put a dent in it of Y. Like that means something, and it's substantive because we've taken away their ability to economically incentive people that are conducting illegal activity inside our borders, regardless of it. So, but we have to go to work, I think, as triage and priority against what are going to be the biggest impacts into affecting their economy. Because that is the crippling point to any of these industries. You start crippling their economy, now you're taking away jobs. When you're taking away jobs and opportunity inside of black market activity, that means people don't have economic mobility. They can't move up if there isn't any jobs. So they're going to go seek jobs, employment in other places because it's a human condition. You have to have money in order to exchange that money for goods and services to live. So will they flood out, and ultimately will they conform into what I would say is a civilian population standard economy basis in like Mexico, Guatemala, El Salvador, like we'll just call it South America? Mm-hmm. The answer is yes, that's going to take a while, right? So that's where I think import, export, and then understanding within not only our borders, but this hemisphere, providing the right economic incentives. I'm not talking about giving them money. I'm talking about how do we
building factories, creating jobs. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I'm really who am I, right, to talk about this other than I'm looking at it from economic impact, direct results as far as shrinking the overall economy that's directly impacting our society in a negative way, going to work on the big pieces and then targeting the small pieces as we continue to go. But right now, in the first 4 years, I think it's really important to have substantive economic damage to illegal activity that's coming in from all around the world. So right. If we're talking about targeting very specific gang activity like MS-13 or whatever it is, what is their main economic engine? Is it drugs? I would imagine it is, right? Mm-hmm. So that's where I think we have to focus our intent, big organizations, big economic impact. What are their drivers? How do we be very precise? And that's not necessarily about body count. That's about keeping drugs out of our country, right?
Yeah.
Keeping them out, because that provides real substantive economic impact, because where are they going to take it? Where are they going to sell it? I might be oversimplifying it. I'm sure I am.
No, I remember, I think a lot of people that when they do face this issue, they hear the things on, TV, and we're designating them terrorists, and, just like everybody, because I don't know, the last 25 years at a GWAT, they're going to imagine a bunch of, unit guys showing up with their head cams and just smoking 300 cartel members with their, doing their dances with all their, tricked out stuff on. And that's what people are imagining that this is what this is about when they don't even stop for a minute and say, well, How much influence does the cartels have in the Mexican government? How much influence do they have? How many cartel leaders actually own predominant legitimate businesses in Mexico? And, I mean, it's just, and then, the collapse and what that looks like. I mean, obviously there's still a market. Maybe the market moves and goes in a different direction, Europe or Southeast Asia. But now it's the market's cut in half. Now there's going to be these civil wars that emerge, which we already saw 5-6 years ago. I remember Lara Logan being down on the border and being on the top of a roof, and I forget the Homeland guy she was with there's a full firefight going on, in the town right over, and I think it's good for people to hear, that kind of distilling down to, hey, you got to focus on the bigger things first.
Well, and I think that's part of it, right? But like, there's also kind of a what I would say is a physics truth, which is energy begets energy. So violent energy begets violent energy. And so the more we plug in with violent energy, quite possibly the more violent energy we're going to have to face here. So what my biggest concern is that violent energy conducted across or in, South America, Mexico, where we're at, will end up here and affecting civilians. And that would be the wrong equation for us to not play out from a second and third order effect. So protect the borders, protect people, what I would say is bad actors from entering the country itself, go to work on their economy to collapse essentially the pillars of the cornerstone of the illegal activity or the black market. Mm-hmm. And then of course there's going to have to be, I think, a kinetic environment in there too, but we do have to protect the homeland and make sure that we don't start that too early, because we don't want what I would say is the violent spillover to affect innocent American lives here. That would be the one to watch out.
I think that's genius. I mean, that's a legitimate, well thought out evaluation. And that hopefully gives people a little bit of pause to say, oh yeah, we're going to go to the war with the cartels, but it's all going to be in Mexico. I mean, that's a brilliant way to kind of put people back in a position where they can think a little bit more critically about it. For me, the thing is we've had roughly 100,000 plus deaths from fentanyl every year since COVID, like more deaths than World War II, right? That's the craziest number. Number one thing, killing young people, 18 to, 26 or 29 or something like that, and just wreaking havoc. Well, and this is something that I think you and I are always focused on, man. Every time that I'm around you or with you, we always kind of go towards this idea is that young men right now, right, they're with kind of the lack of courage, I think, and that's not all on themselves. I think a lot of it's been driven out of them for a whole different types of social issues. But like, we stop those drugs, right? We get those young men, out of drugs or access to drugs. And then it's like, okay, now it's cool to go back in the military again. And all right, or go to law enforcement. Law enforcement's looking good again too. Let's take the handcuffs off them, let them do those jobs. We still have the challenges with a lot of DAs, but this gap, I think, for us provides this wonderful opportunity, in particular for young men, to start to say, all right, man, now I can get my mojo back. Now I can start going. So in your mind, where does that courage begin to reemerge in young men right now?
Well, I think it kind of starts with, it starts with the country. It starts with our leaders. They have to earn trust back, that they're not going to put guys like you and I in endless wars for Northrop Grumman, Raytheon, and Halliburton. Number one, you got to earn back trust that we're just not going to flippantly send our children now, right? Our children off to wars for profit, because I distill different things now down to like simple truths, which is there are wars of choice and there are wars of maintaining sovereignty, which is in those, you don't have a choice. You have to maintain the sovereignty of the country. So when you have a war of choice, which is one of the issues that we've seen over the last several decades, is these are wars that we have fought based on we've decided, or somebody, the decider decided, right?
Right.
That we're going to send young men and women off to die in foreign countries with no success criteria. There's quite literally a negative strategic gain in the long-term effects of it. So it starts with a clear understanding, and really you have to have leaders that are not willing to, what I would say is squander courage, because it is the most precious thing that I think men can encompass, embody, and ultimately utilize in their life. Like, being a courageous man is, I think, one of the finest virtues. Quite possibly, I don't know if you can be wise without being courageous, to be honest with you. I think it's kind of a foundational element. But service to our country should never be squandered by our leaders. And what I've consistently had a hard time with over and over is that, did our leaders actually have us, the best, our interests, and did they sacrifice our courage and our time and our lives because of a personal interest or belief? So I definitely had this issue with a lot of the neocons that got us into Iraq, because I've spent a huge percentage of my time in Iraq. I don't think guys like Paul Wolfowitz, W, Cheney, Rumsfeld, Rummy, I don't like. First and foremost, I think you have to be a man of courage in order to send men off to die. So I think there's a distinct difference. I think there's a distinct difference between, people like to pull back in history and look at different men and women, both actually, that have made decisions to send people off to die for our country or a cause. And there's very distinct differences between Vietnam and World War II, Iraq, Afghanistan, and World War II. And we can't continue to rest America's image on the sacrifice of the men in World War II. That was a choice. We didn't have a choice. That was a war of national sovereignty. We had to maintain our national sovereignty. And the men that were leading us through those times, even if you look at, Truman for the back half, Truman was a decorated World War I veteran. Post that in the Cold War, Eisenhower obviously led the Allied invasion. Winston Churchill, I don't know if there was a time in his life leading into World War II that guy wasn't giving a speech that was directly at affront to the Nazi encroachment on civil liberties in the Western world, right? So he was a man of courage. Not only physically, he had personified courage as a soldier, but then he did it every day through his speeches, through his acts of virtue. And I'm not lionizing anyone. Everybody has their faults. We're all human, right? So you're not saying they're perfect. Everyone is flawed. But I don't necessarily know if the men that sent us to these wars in Afghanistan and Iraq were men of courage and women of courage. I think from a theoretical academic thought process, they, like Wolfowitz, is an extremely intelligent guy. But I don't think they don't understand the real sacrifice, nor did they. They didn't understand the Middle East. They didn't understand Iraq. And they don't have the tangible experience of the blood and sacrifice of men in the sands of a foreign country to really understand what they were doing. They didn't truly understand it. So I think you have to build back trust, Dave. Number one, you're not going to send people off to die in a dumb fucking war.
And that's what scares the hell out of me. I know you're paying attention to it like I do, but now all of a sudden it's you start to see those old school mentalities start to, move that radical. And where is it going? It's right back on Iran. And, I wanted to get your thoughts of if some, I don't think it's a stretch, but if something begins to turn the tides of the the administrative focus towards recognizing that Iran is a threat or whatever, and we get into a kinetic war with them, it's not going to be like any of the other ones. I mean, this one's could be devastating and has grander implications globally as well too. But what I see in my head is I see another, 3 million American kids, or at least in their minds, are going to roger up and go fight over in the deserts of southern Iran and Iraq and, over in Afghanistan. I mean, it's madness to me, but there's a sensation that I think is building that that's a possibility. Do you think that might be true?
I've learned over, the last couple of decades to never question the arrogance or stupidity of our political leadership, which, like, to be quite honest with you, I mean, anytime now I hear the drum beats of war, I'm highly skeptical. And the first question I have to ask is this a war of necessity? Does Iran have the capacity to eliminate our national sovereignty? The answer is no.
Absolutely not. No.
So that's the number one principle of having what I would define as a virtuous war, because you don't have a choice. When you have a choice, and I'm not saying that there's a difference between having a position and a strategic interest in eliminating threats to the United States. That's not necessarily a hot war against another nation state, right? That's pursuing people that have that are affecting your national security and ultimately your economic interest internationally. That's not like getting yourself into a hot war with the third largest army in the world. I think there are a lot of different options out there that we could exhaust before this went into some type of hot war exchange. I think it would be extremely detrimental. One, I don't know if the American public can handle another war, right? I mean, we've been at war. We just ended the Afghan war after 20 plus years. To go to Iran I think it would be a really big mistake. I really do.
I mean, for me, on a personal level, it's like every outcome is the antithesis of what the outcome that I was led to believe was going to be the outcome, right? All of them. And you can go back, as far, I mean, Vietnam, even before that, I mean, probably, and it's like, now you're trying to pitch us another one. Because, as I've shared with you deeply, like, one of my greatest concerns is that we have squandered that eternal flame of courage in young men. And this could break the will completely. It's interesting. I left watching the Johnny on the Street interviews and all that. And I recently watched one of somebody over in England. Right. And it's when Starmer was, projecting, America's leaving Ukraine behind and we as Englishmen need to get behind this. And, they were saber-rattling a little bit, like, we're going to put boots on the ground and that type of thing. And this guy was on the street and he's like, wow, do you believe in what's Starmer's position? Oh, yeah, his position in Ukraine is great. All right, would you sign up as soon as they declared war and go, well, yeah. You know what I mean? Well, that's not technically happening. So, I still think American men are the greatest fighters on the planet. I think they always will be. However, if you trick them again and you put these young lads, in one more time, I mean, there are catastrophic consequences that inevitably will come when the crux of the majority of the people you're counting on to project that power no longer feel feel that sense of imbued patriotism to go fight and wage whatever war they ask us to do again.
Yeah, I mean, I think, love for country is one, trust right? It's like love and trust. I think really they're honestly built on each other, right? So the foundation of our love for our families and our wives and it is built on the fact that, especially I think when we're talking about our wives, right? It's like trust, right? Respect, trust. So to have a profound amount of patriotism, you also have to have a profound amount of trust in your political officials, your elected officials. And if we go to war again, I see that as it's completely eroding the trust in our elected officials, because whether or not you can thoroughly intellectualize something doesn't mean you can't feel it. Because I don't know about you, but after a few years in Iraq, I could feel it. I couldn't like articulate. I was still trying to like really provide myself the what I would say is the intellectual effort to try to like keep in the fight, right? Where I think that there's been a significant amount of trust lost. And, I just don't see a world where we can do this again without sacrificing the trust within our fellow countrymen, especially the new generation of warfighters. Like this might, to your point, this might be the death nail of being able to recruit people into the military, because there will be a complete deterioration of trust within the American political system.
Amen. Wow. Unbelievable. All right. Last question for you and then I do have one more Patreon question for everybody after that, but that's a fun one. So fun and serious, but this is the last question. All right. Obviously, you run a public company, the whole tariffs thing. We had a really brilliant young economist on the other day. Guy was really smart, talked about onshoring up 7% year over year. Talked about how actually the economy is doing really good, and that tariffs was just, one more thing what the old guard media was trying to light up to destroy any semblance of success within the Trump administration. As a person that is highly engaged in the American economy, are you pleased with where we're going right now in the economy? And where do you see the economy going in the next 6 months to a year?
Well, I think I am pleased that we're having some type of what I would say is a balancing conditions between other countries and import export, and specifically in tariffs. Like we have to make it. What I would say is we have to have the appropriate economic incentives to encourage businesses and small businesses to keep manufacturing and hire people within like the United States. We have to. And, we've had such a long run of offshoring a lot of the industries specifically to one of our greatest strategic threats. I mean, China, which doesn't make any sense, by the way. Like there's no reality I think that we could all live in where the only reality I can figure out is like, okay, there's a codependency economically from the two main military superpowers in the world. Well, okay. Well, now if we decouple those, then we'll both collapse our economies, which nobody would want to do, right? But just based on the fact that like humans mostly, like they do want economic security on both sides. So to be a political zealot, whether you're a communist or a Democrat, it would also mean a forfeiture of some type of your political ideology in that regard. So it's not only economic, but it's also political, and they're tied. The thing that I see is there does have to be a balance. And one of the greatest things that I think we've been able to do over the last three months is now we have a really complex conversation around what do these mean? What is it reciprocity as far as like tariffs from China, tariffs in the United States, tariffs internationally? How do we need to look at them? But really, I think the macro conversation is how do we directly support and economically encourage Americans to be in these manufacturing jobs and or these jobs that we've traditionally in the last several decades outsourced to other countries, because it not only protects the country economically if we maintain our logistics and our supply chain within the borders, because as we saw during COVID, when the border shut down and we don't actually have a stable supply chain, it directly affects our economy. And if we think back to the $5 trillion that we had to that we re-injected or injected back into the American economy to artificially prop it up over the course of COVID, we should have learned a few things over that, which is there are a few things that we really have to just make bomb-proof from a supply chain, logistics, and manufacturing capacity. We have to maintain for national security some form of a semblance of our supply chain and technology manufacturing. We do. Like, we just have to from a strategic interest perspective. Economically, it makes us more powerful because now we can start to export more and we're more competitive in the international workforce or international workplace economy. But from an individual level, I'm highly encouraged by it. Yes, I understand that coffee prices are going to go up based on the impact. Got it. Okay. Coffee has been underpriced for 50 years.
Wow.
Like, it was at its lowest price point like last year in modern history. And we're consuming more coffee than we ever have. And yet the coffee prices are low. And a lot of that is built on, the type of farming that is being conducted in Brazil for mass manufacturing of agriculture products, specifically coffee, is artificially driving down the price. So if we have to pay a little bit more for coffee, I mean, people walk into coffee shops around the United States and pay $4 every day for drip coffee, typically. Okay. Well, you get a lot more than for a $10 to $12 bag of coffee. You can have 18 to 20 cups of coffee, right? So that just means that you have to shift your purchasing behavior, because if you can afford a $5 drip coffee and you got to pay an extra $1 in the grocery store to stabilize and reinforce what I would say is an appropriate, strategically aligned supply chain that maintains our sovereignty, like, that's important. So I think it's economically of interest to the United States. I also think it dovetails directly into maintaining our national sovereignty. So, I am highly encouraged that this tariff conversation will, one, at least start the multi-country debate, and we're going to land in a much better spot in this negotiation.
Awesome, man. I love to hear you talk about it, man. It's funny, man, when you start to think about commodities and you start to think about how integrated they are into the purchasing mindset of everyday life, right? Coffee's at the pinnacle of them, right? And I mean, and I just to see the way you're able to summarize it and expand on it for a grander economic stability, it's really cool, and I appreciate your thoughts on that, buddy.
Well, I think to add one more thing to that.
Yeah,
I think
please.
we should always be thinking about our national security and our strategic interests as well as our economic interests, right? So it's just kind of always been a head scratcher the last 20 years why we've capitulated so much of our economics to China. And we've ultimately directly contributed to the build of their economy, which then lends itself to them having a larger military and a much bigger military scope and more strategic authority. That is directly misaligned with our long-term strategic goals. Mm-hmm. So why are we outsourcing big economic pieces of our economic condition in America to our most strategic foe? That, to me, even if we just look at, let's just cut the world in half and look at this hemisphere for 2 minutes. Okay. If we just look at Mexico, if we were actively encouraging industry in Mexico, would we have such a border crisis? If there was more economic mobility and advancement, if people had opportunities to go to work in high paying manufacturing jobs just in Mexico, would there be such a border crisis? I think not. I'm not an economist. I'm just kind of a guy that roasts coffee and hired a few people. Like, I can pontificate about this all day long. But if you have more economic mobility, more jobs within our own hemisphere, now we don't have to ship those jobs in our supply chain and manufacturing out to our most strategic foe. Like, that to me seems it's easier to get goods in and out. We're aligned with the people that we're sharing our borders with from a national security perspective. They're not our enemies. Okay. There's more to gain from building even what I would say is not only our internal economics, but also making it economically advantageous for our friends to do business with us, not our enemies.
Right. Oh, I think that's the key to a global success as it is, right? I think the real thing is what I'm a big supporter of is, hey, let's just make it more fair, right? Yeah. Let's enable our goods and services to have a much more competitive edge around the world, and instead of just being the overall consumer of all things. And yeah, I thank you for sharing that, man. I think that really helps people. Because I know when I'm on the road, obviously, I just spent a couple of days up in New Jersey. I talked to probably, I don't know, maybe like 400 people in 2 days, and had some really amazing conversations with these advisors who are, talking about the conversations they're having with their people, with the people that, have invested in, they're managing their portfolios. And it's like last week or whenever, when the tariff thing hit and the market dumped, like people were losing their freaking minds because they aren't thinking about it in the scope that you just described it as. So I think it's incredibly valuable. I think, even though you are, just kind of an old knuckle dragging coffee guy, I think your wisdom does have an impact for people. So thank you so much for sharing that.
A buddy of mine, he always gives me this advice. He's like, take a deep breath. Things are never as good or as bad as you think they are. And it's like this whole conversation last week that like the economy went up and down. You're on a roller coaster ride. And it's like, okay, take a deep breath. Like, okay, what's in the long term? And I think that was the, part of the narrative, which is, there's some short-term pain for some long-term benefit. And what did he say? He's like, you got to take your medicine a little bit. And I'm like, hey, he didn't get us here, by the way. Like, this was a series of different presidents starting at Nixon that ultimately landed us here. So like, don't kill the messenger when they're telling you, like, hey, listen, this is for the long-term good.
For your children or for your grandchildren, man. That's the way I'm constantly framing this whole thing, is like, man, is the pain right now going to benefit for the positives of my children when they're out there starting businesses, joining the military, working for a corporation, pouring coffee, whatever it is, man. How do we set it up for them? That's we're the stewards of the future, right? Right. And I think it's just critical that everybody understands it and takes that on their backs. Yeah, man.
You can't saddle the future with $35 trillion of debt. Like, you just can't do it. Like, it's immoral for us not to do something about it. And ultimately, that could be our greatest act of courage, is like going to work, making sure that we don't saddle the next generations with so much debt that they're going to spend half their lives working for the federal government. That's because we chose to loan money at the tune of trillions of dollars because we can balance a budget and we can stop fraudulent spending, right? It's like, these are just like, I calculated it a while back. We'll call it $15 trillion just between the global war on terror and COVID, right? So we started the GWAT at just about $5 trillion in debt. And then we exited Afghanistan with, $34 trillion in debt. So like, all of those trillions of dollars, and none of which was spent on building American infrastructure, rebuilding our education or high-speed railways, or I could think of a 1,000 different initiatives that quite possibly would have been more of an economic advantage than like sinking it into the soil in Central Asia or the Middle East.
I agree, brother. I agree, dude. Love seeing your face, man. Thank you so much for coming on. I can't wait till the next time. I promise you next time is going to be with you out there. All right,
Please.
buddy?
Yeah, come out anytime, Dave. I love you, buddy.
Love you too, man. God bless you, brother. Thank you.
Thank you.
The following is a preview for our additional content only available on Patreon. One of the things that we're hoping on Patreon that we can do for everybody, especially the young people that are coming, is just give them some little bit of wisdom. And so there's two main things that I want. I would love it if you could just kind of just pontificate a little bit more on is one, where can people find courage in themselves? Like, what are the activities? What are the things? What can they read? What are the basics, right? That invoke a grander sense of being courageous, right? That's the first half. And then the second half is once they discover it, once they start to feel it, how can then they invest that courage into something tangible that validates the effort itself, that allows the courage to continue?
It's a great question. You and I have talked about this a lot. So a lot of things come to mind, which is there's a falsehood that's kind of built on Hollywood that, people just average Joe can like roll out of bed, their feet hit the floor, and then they're all of a sudden going to become courageous. And that just doesn't exist. It's a practiced art. It's a lifetime endeavor, and it never ends, actually. So you have to kind of sign yourself up for the individual work that is going to last for the rest of your life. Because I used to talk about this, 20 years ago. You have to seek out challenges that intentionally drive fear back into your heart. And then you have to pursue those things with practice, discipline, organized effort. And you have to work through the problem in a very methodical crawl, walk, run phase. And then you have to practice being scared, which is...
To hear the rest of this incredible interview with my great friend, Evan Hafer, go over to our Patreon site where you can hear us talk a lot about some ideas that'll enhance courage and really propel you to find your purpose in life. Also, we really want to announce on May 31st, we're going to have a live motivational event, an hour of discussing the whole core concepts behind what I've learned over the last 30 years. Then we'll open it up to an hour-long Q&A where you can ask me anything you want about motivation, performance, and all of the other topics that I've been working on for a long, long time. Join us for $2 a month on our Patreon at David Rutherford Show. Thank you.